All right, we are going to talk to Anthony. Hello, Anthony. You are on the line. What would you like to talk about today?
Yeah, I saw the title of today's video was Do We Have a Soul? And I wanted to discuss that with you.
Cool. That's one of my
Perfect.
faves.
Yeah, so I do believe we have a soul, and I believe it's logically deducible to
Okay.
understand this. We can't know all the details, but we can kind of understand that it's the most likely and reasonable possibility. And the reason I think this is because to me, the question of whether we have a soul is kind of equivalent to the idea of continuation of consciousness after death, which I think is more likely than the extinguishing of consciousness after death. So that's kind of where I am. I guess my question to you first, would you agree that if uh, if consciousness continues after death, or let me ask this: consciousness cannot be explained entirely in terms of brain processes or
That's not
physical
necessarily true.
chemical. Well, yeah, I'm just trying to establish a premise. If it's true that consciousness cannot necessarily be if it's true that consciousness cannot be proven to be entirely based on physical processes, that means some aspect of our consciousness is not contingent on the physical body. Okay, so that
I don't
means
hold
some
that premise
aspect
to
of
be
our.
true, but you're asking me to follow you along a premise that I don't believe is true.
I understand that. I know you don't believe that. What I'm just trying to say is, if it's true that
Okay. What's
consciousness,
your
that
what's your reasoning for thinking that that's true?
I just want you to agree that if consciousness
Well, you can
can't
want
be,
me to agree with all you want, but
No,
I'm not.
yeah, but like Anthony, this is like saying if I had $1 billion in my bank account, blah 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 blah, but do you have $1 billion? No, I don't have it. So like it's it's a hypothetical conversation that doesn't make sense until you get past the first part.
no, well, we
Right.
Do you
need
see
to,
that?
we need
Exactly.
to,
I'm not going to go past the
you're,
first part until until you can absolutely demonstrate the truth of the premise. You don't get to say, I have a premise that I have absolutely no support for, but in order for me to continue this conversation with you, I need you to say yes to it. If in order for the rest of what I'm about to say to hold true, I have to base this on a premise that I'm not willing to support. And I'm saying, I'll go with you if you can support that premise to my satisfaction. Are you not willing to attempt to support that premise?
no, I'm
'Cause I'm not
going
gonna go
to,
with
I'm
you on
going
the
to.
rest of the journey. Okay, well, then support the premise.
Okay, well, let me just reestablish the premise and then support it. This premise is, if
Mhm.
consciousness cannot be explained entirely in terms of physical processes, that means some
No, no,
aspect of
no,
our
no, no,
consciousness.
no, no, no. That's not the premise. You can't use the word "if" for the premise.
Exactly. You would have to say that consciousness is not, right? And then support that
Okay,
premise.
okay,
Premises don't start
consciousness
with
is
"if."
not entirely based on physical processes. Therefore, some aspect of our consciousness continues after
No,
death. All right.
Not
That's,
no.
therefore. Support that premise before you get to therefore. First, you gotta support that premise. So now we're at the point where you support
okay.
that premise.
When we examine the nature of the physical brain, which is where people believe consciousness is produced, there
Mhm.
is, at the basic level, no mechanism or law or physical structure that we can point to that we can say produces consciousness. Okay?
We can't point to one
With
physical aspect of the brain and say that it produces consciousness right now, but we can point to multiple components of the brain and say that they're inextricably linked to consciousness. I don't think that you would argue with that. Like without a
Oh no, I don't
functioning
argue that.
brain. Okay, cool. So you're with me there. There, without a brain, there is no consciousness. Like that for sure.
No, I
Both of
don't.
us can
No,
agree on.
no, no. I don't believe that. That's not true. What I'm.
Can you think
I
of
don't
an
know if you
example of
remember
something
exact.
without a brain that's conscious?
Like a spiritual being doesn't have a physical
Something
brain,
that
but they
exists
probably.
demonstratably. Something that exists demonstratably,
Okay.
tangibly that we
My
can
point
point
is
to and
this.
measure.
All right. If
No, so you're
if
good. So no, no, no,
no.
not your point is this. So you can't think of something that doesn't have a brain that is conscious. We'll agree on that, right?
Well, we don't know what's conscious.
Not
Some
that you
people
can
say
support
flowers
with
are
any kind
conscious.
of evidence. Not without yada yada
Some people
yadaing over it.
Well, some people say flowers are conscious because they
I mean, they can
respond
say that all you
to
want, but then your
stimuli.
definition of consciousness would kind of devolve into a little bit of nonsense, I think.
Well, they seem
It
they
certainly
seem
it
to,
certainly
and
wouldn't be
not.
something
I'm
that could
not.
be demonstrated, right? In the way that we would want it to be
It,
demonstrated
it
for the
can be
purpose of this
demonstrated.
conversation.
I think it can be demonstrated. Maybe not necessarily flowers, but there are organisms with very basic nervous systems, which could hardly be described as brains, which are reacting to They are single-celled organisms which have
Yeah,
no
that
brains
react to
because
their
they're one
external
cell.
environment reflexively. But
Well, they're not
do we
reacting. They're making decisions. We can see them making decisions. They have a decision-making process, and they have no brain because they're one cell.
well, I
They're
mean, it's a
literally
nervous
amoeba.
system, so they're reacting reflexively based on a nervous response. Okay,
But
we're
wait,
They
going
don't have a system.
but do you
you
think
just
that
said they
that
did.
is do you think that that is not those simple examples you gave are not explainable purely through physical processes? These choice making mechanisms, for example?
Well, you asked me if there's an organism with consciousness that doesn't have a brain. I'm telling you,
And I'm
single-celled
asking you
organisms don't have a
now,
brain.
yeah, you gave us examples, which is great. And now I'm asking you if those examples have this ethereal or can't be explained entirely physically.
It would seem they can't be explained entirely physically because how are they making decisions if they don't have a brain? There must be some sort of
How does a
conscious.
coin making? How does a coin sorting machine sort coins without a brain? It's like these are physical
That's
processes.
well, a decision is when a decision is made. What's the laws of physics are being violated as we know them. So the laws of physics are
What?
mechanistic, which means everything goes.
Name one.
Everything should
Na- Go ahead.
name one what?
Name one
Law
law
of
of
physics
physics
that's
that is
violated by decision making.
violated.
I would say all of them. Gravity, for one, because
Gravity is
if you're going
violated
downhill,
by decision making?
yes, absolutely. Because if
No,
you're going,
gravity
because
is.
objects,
No.
this is
Do you think
Really?
obvious.
mass?
All right,
Do you think that if I stop a coin from falling, that I have stopped mass from
all I'm
attracting each
saying is, all
other?
right, if the natural tendency of gravity is to fall downward, right?
That no, no, that's not what gravity is.
Oh, okay. Well,
Uh,
okay. Well, gravity pulls you to the center of of a larger object, right?
mhm, yeah,
So if you're a
and do
human
you?
being, if you're a human being standing
If I
on the earth and you stand up, are you not defying gravity?
No.
no, I'm
You're still
applying
subject to
greater
the
You are.
laws
local.
of
Yes, you are.
gravity.
Gravity is
No.
still doing all the same work. Absolutely,
So what?
you're overcoming the force of gravity temporarily with a greater force. Just like you would agree that forces have different magnitudes, right? And greater forces win over lesser
Well,
forces. Doesn't mean the lesser forces
let me
stop
put it this way.
existing.
Let me put it this way. Okay, the force of gravity is not suspended, but you are acting in an unnatural way against the force of gravity, which would pull you towards the
No.
center of an object.
What?
It's still a
What?
natural, you're still operating within physics. If I stand up out of my chair, if I raise my arms above my head, nothing about the laws of physics are defied or suspended by me doing that. I am still operating within that paradigm without defying it at all.
Okay, I guess I'm not trying to say you're defying gravity or you're suspending gravity. What I'm trying to say is you violate the natural order of what gravity would dictate that you do.
No,
Wait,
I'm
are you?
still like gravity's still
So
doing it's still gravitying when I'm moving around.
okay, so what's the
It's
how come when a human stands up, what's the difference between a human being and a rock? So a rock just sits there, it doesn't go up. But human
so
beings
you're
can
so you're
you,
attempting to say that our
it,
volition, so our ability as humans to move around in the world is evidence that so let's just say like if for your example, I think I'm trying to understand what you're saying. So I'm just going to try to steel man you as best I can. If we didn't have consciousness, we would just basically be lying flat on the ground because we couldn't act
yes,
at all. But because we have
yes,
consciousness, we are able to have motility.
yes. That is exactly right. If we didn't have consciousness,
Oh,
we would
So
be no
so
different
but
from a rock lying on the ground.
I gotcha. Okay. So I see what you're
so a
saying now, but
geyser. Sorry, Shannon, you go ahead.
yeah,
Well,
no, I no, a geyser's a good example, like the or a
A
volcano.
geyser must be conscious because it goes against gravity.
what I'm saying is there's a
I think
moment
his
in time.
symmetry, Baker, is that the difference between a geyser and us in this conversation for Anthony, I believe, is that we're making conscious choices and we're saying those conscious choices are natural. So if they're natural conscious choices, I can't get to the rest of it because I'm not sure I can follow him there. But I think that's what he's getting at is that there's something that must be unnatural about conscious decisions. Otherwise, we would just be flat on the ground, not moving, I guess.
So
Right.
yeah, so
Yeah.
there are robots, for example, that can do everything that we do, but are absolutely not conscious. Are they in any way violating any law of physics?
No, but we
What about
we have a
robots?
full yeah,
Like
robots. So, well,
yeah, like you could
Yeah, that's
program a
what I
here's the
just
thing.
asked
robot
about.
to move around. Yeah, sorry. I guess I blanked
That's
out while I
literally
was
what
thinking
I
of the
asked him
exact
about.
same as you.
Yep.
But a robot,
Sorry.
a robot will only do what it's programmed to do.
But
We say
no.
it
But
Okay.
can't
you're
do anything
saying
else.
you said the act of standing violates
Yeah, you could
physics
choose a
in some way
standing.
that needs explaining. A
If you
robot can
program a
absolutely go
robot to
from
stand
sitting to
up,
standing. Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
But it's programmed to do
No,
that.
but
It's
but
programmed to do that.
but
So
then
a robot will never
right. So
do
nothing about.
anything.
Oh, absolutely. Robots can absolutely do things that they were not programmed to do. There is absolutely in large language models, there is emergent properties that people do not understand. These
Just I can
the
learn.
current state of AI absolutely has undesigned consequences in what's happening because properties are emerging that people didn't specifically program it to do. But you were talking about the literal physical act of standing up.
Well, that actually wasn't going to
Somehow,
be my main line of argument. We kind of got derailed into that.
We did.
What I really wanted to focus on is the atomic structure. There is no identifiable source of consciousness.
What do you mean? That seems like a
If
strange
okay,
statement to make because we can look at like a really
okay,
microscopic level and we can see the actions that take place and they're very, very well defined and know what happens for neuronal
I agree, they're
firing.
well
We can
designed.
see the
Who designed them?
so
interconnectivity into other brain regions. We can see like the nodes and brain regions that react to certain things. So there's
Hmm.
absolutely like a really well mapped structure of like we know where
So
we
you would
make
argue.
decisions.
So you would argue that we can identify the emergence of consciousness in brain activity.
I believe that we absolutely can. I think that there's
All right.
still kind of like a mind body problem where we don't know where it's unified, but I think that the only reasonable answer given all of the models of consciousness that I've looked at is a naturalistic one because dualism has a real significant problem. Monism might be closer. Dualism definitely has a huge problem. I'm not sure what your model is really of what a soul might be. It sounds like it's a model that allows the soul to exist after death, but where
Hmm.
most of these models fall apart for me is that there's a serious interaction problem, right? So if you agree that the brain absolutely does, create thoughts and behaviors and we can see those happening and we can see that at a macroscopic level and we can look at brain regions, we can mess with those brain regions and see that we lose function or gain function as a result. Like we know all of these things very, very explicitly, we know these things. Then you would have to have some form of interaction, right? In order for these things to take place. Like we know where motility takes place, we know where like higher order thoughts like type 2 thoughts take place, we know a lot of these things. So in any model that anybody would want me to accept, they would have to explain that interaction problem because it can't go both ways. You can't have your brain communicating with your soul and then your soul communicating with your brain. Even one way would be a problem. Any way would be a problem because you have a serious interaction problem. That's the crux of it. That's what makes all of the models fall apart to me is the interaction problem.
Okay. Well, if we can't explain the interaction model, we can theoretically determine that some interaction model exists.
No,
even if we
not
don't know
really.
exactly.
No, not really, because it would make crazy stuff happen, right? Because we know that in order for me to be able to process the thought that it took for me to have this conversation with you or move my finger or, daydream, we know that there needs to be neuronal firing in order for any of that to take place. It does not take place without it. And we know the nodes in the brain where it does take place, right? So we can look at the brain and we can see what makes those neurons fire. So we know that there's an action potential required. And in order for that potential to take place, you need to release a chemical in the brain called ATP. That ATP is produced in the mitochondria, and it opens up a threshold on either side of the cell membrane in order to create an electrical current when there's a certain concentration of sodium and potassium ions on either side of the cell membrane. So if for there to be an interaction at all, you would need to have that soul both convince a mitochondria to produce ADP at a specific rate in order to do what the soul wants when it wants it to. And you would have to actually physically create a physical state where there was a certain amount of sodium and potassium ions on either side of the neuronal cell membrane in order for that ATP to open the channel for them to travel back and forth to create the action potential for that neuron to fire. So that's a physical process. That's an absolutely measurable, discernible physical process. So if a soul can make a shift, like if my brain is ready to make one decision and my soul says, no, we're making a different decision, then you have to change instantaneously the physical constitution of my brain in a manner that would be absolutely traceable in every MRI that ever existed. And it's never been seen. The brain is a steady state, and you can always see what's happening is anticipated based on the existing physiological constitution of the brain. So unless you can show me a case, multitude of cases, it would have to be every case where all of a sudden we look at an MRI and the complete constitution of the brain just fires in a way that absolutely makes no sense, because we've now changed the physical construction of the brain in order for those action potentials to happen, in order for the soul to interact with the brain. Then maybe I'd believe you if the brain was doing some crazy unanticipated stuff. But unfortunately, for your argument, it's not. It's doing really mundane, very predictable stuff based on the physiological
We
constitution
don't
of
know.
existing statuses of the brain that we know, understand, and can measure. So tell me where your interaction happens, because it can't be there. Or tell me why
How do you?
neuronal
So you
firing
didn't.
doesn't matter. Those are your only two
It does
options.
matter, but how do we know that the mind isn't what initiates every aspect of that process you just described?
How is the
I didn't hear
mind
you.
moving sodium and potassium around in the brain?
I don't know,
And why
but
can't we
how do we
see
know
that
it isn't?
happening? Why isn't our brain consistently in a flux state then? Because the brain would
You said
consistently be in
we
a
can't.
flux state, because it would be moving
You
physical
said we
matter
can't
around.
see. Yeah, you said we can't see the mind operating, but how do we know the mind isn't made of a substance that our science can't investigate at this current time?
Well, then why do we need
Maybe at
sodium
some point,
potassium ion thresholds in order for neurons to fire? Why
because
doesn't the mind just
because
make
we
neurons
exist.
fire? Why did neurons die of cellular hypoxia if they lack the oxygen or the thresholds for that
Yeah,
to
we
take
need a
place?
physical
Why
body
does
to do
cellular
physical
hypoxia
actions.
even exist? Which is the entire existence of most of the endogenous DMT in the brain. It exists because we have a sigma 6 receptor on our neurons that, if we go into cellular, which causes hallucinations, that if we go into cellular hypoxia, that sigma 6 receptor will take in our endogenous
Mm.
DMT to live a little bit longer, right? So that it can keep firing. But if the mind is what makes neurons fire, then none of those mechanisms are necessary. None of those survival
They are
mechanisms, none of those
necessary.
action potential mechanisms. They either are or they are not in your model, right? They either are physically necessary and it's a physical process, or whatever the soul is does it for us. And none of these physical processes are necessary. You can't have it both ways.
The soul operates through the physical processes. We have a physical
How?
body because we don't know, but it's logically
Okay.
deducible that my model
It's
is what's
not.
necessary
No,
fundamentally.
what is Occam's razor, Anthony?
We can't apply Occam's razor to a situation we don't know all the variables.
You don't multiply unnecessary entities. You have and there's nothing necessary that you've presented that this, like, so for example, dark matter explains certain things, right? So it's often thought of that. For now, we will tentatively say dark matter is a thing because it is a necessary entity for things. Shannon just described all kinds of processes where a soul is absolutely not necessary, but you're saying, how do you know there isn't one? So you are multiplying entities. You didn't demonstrate why one was necessary. You just said, well, you can't rule it out.
All right, actually, believe it or not, I think dark matter proves my theory, because dark matter is something that scientists have proposed based on what we observe in the physical universe that is
Yeah, so what is
inexplicable
that
and
thing?
purely
What is the thing that you are? What is the thing? We understand the analogy of the dark matter. That's why I brought it up. So, what is the thing that is unexplained that needs this soul so that we will just ignore all the other interaction problems?
hold on, let me put it this way. Dark matter is to the physical universe what our mind is to our body. So we see
What
things
is
happening
the
in the
thing
brain.
that the mind explains
The mind
that
explains the
requires
initiation of
it?
the chemical processes in the brain. The mind is what
Doesn't.
explains the initiation of the chemical processes in the brain.
You're
That
just saying
we
that the
Without the
mind is a
mind
sodium and potassium ion shovel. That's all you're just said. That's basically what you said to me. In
Okay.
which case it would be traceable, right? So you're saying that the physical processes in the brain are initiated by the mind. That's what I'm hearing you saying. So the mind being the
Mm-hmm.
soul, I'm guessing, is like an interchangeable like
Mm-hmm.
synonym for you in this conversation.
Right.
So
Right.
you're saying that the
Right.
reason that sodium and potassium ion thresholds exist is because the soul physically places them there. So that means that the soul has a way of interacting physically with the world and can pick up and move sodium and potassium ions around, and also make cells produce mitochondrial cells in neurons produce ATP. That's all necessary for a neuron to fire. We've already established that. So you're saying that
Mm-hmm.
the soul, the mind, picks those up, moves them around, configures the brain physically configures the brain such that neurons will fire in the manner it dictates. Now, the problem with your statement is that means that we would be able to measure the movement, because if the sodium and potassium ions that were around the neuron that needs to fire weren't present, the soul would need to move them there. They'd need to do one of two things. The soul would need to manifest them whole cloth, which means that the soul can just create matter, which I think would both agree is impossible, or the soul would be able to physically move them from one portion of the brain to the other in order for the neurons it needs to fire to fire. Now, that can't be possible either, because we'd see it. The brain would be in a state of constant physical flux, because its physical constitution at a cellular level would always be changing minute by minute, moment by moment. And we don't
Mm-hmm.
see that. It doesn't happen. That's the
Yes, we do.
interaction problem.
That's
We
literally
don't.
exactly what we observe. Yes, we do.
No, it's not.
So
No,
we
it's
do
not.
observe it.
We don't observe our brains physically reconstituting themselves moment by moment. That's not what
Yes, we do.
happens ever. You can say yes, we do all the time, but that's just not what happens. It's not.
That's exactly what an
You
MRI is.
can't be
It's
real right now. So you're saying that when I look at an MRI, what I see on an MRI,
Mhm.
what I see on any brain scan, is that the constitution of the brain changes. Every area of the brain is constantly just having ions fire all around, back and forth, constantly moving from one neuron to another, from one side of the brain to
no,
another. That's
no.
what would
The
have to
mind interact.
happen.
No,
That's what
you're
would
wrong.
have to
You're wrong.
happen. I'm not.
No,
I've never been
you're
more
wrong.
right. I'm so
No, Shannon.
objectively right. I am
No, the mind.
absolutely objectively, degree on my wall. You don't know who you're talking to right now. Correct about this.
You've been brainwashed. I hate to say it.
By education? One of us has, I think, and one of us is willing to say when they're wrong, because I've said it before when I'm wrong. And one of us just hit a wall and went, nah, I'm right anyway. I'll let you guess which one of us it is.
Shannon, the mind's only going to interact with the parts of the brain that are necessary. I don't know why I have to say
All
that.
of the all of the brain is necessary. All of it is
Nope.
necessary. It exists for a reason.
Nope. There's this. Nope. Well, yeah, at certain times, but not all at once. So there's a speech area. There's a visual cortex. There's
Yeah, name a speech
parts of the
area.
brain for high.
Name a speech area. Since you're such a brain scientist, name a speech
I
area.
think it's
What are the two
called. I think it's
primary
called
speech
Broch's.
areas that we know about called about?
I think one of them's
Don't
called
Google.
Broch's area or something. I'm not
Broca's and
Googling. I
Wernicke's.
know this.
Broca's and Wernicke's. What lobe are they on?
Okay, I knew one of them.
Yeah, what lobe are they generally on?
I believe they're on the temporal lobe.
You're correct. But which lobe are they correct? Are they usually on?
It's called the temporal lobe, right?
Which lobe?
I don't know. Is there more than one temporal lobe?
There's more than one lobe.
So right.
Google
So there's
failing
the
you?
temporal lobe. I'm not Googling. I know this. I've studied this.
Yeah. Which lobe?
See?
If you've
You know-
studied this, you'd know what type and what are they affiliated with?
Yeah, I'm not an expert. I know people will
Aphasia.
criticize me for saying that.
And they're
I
mostly
know
on the left
atheists,
lobe.
he
Generally,
admitted he's not
sometimes
an
they're on the right,
expert.
but
I'm not an expert.
predominantly they're on the left and they're in the temporal. It's like you absolutely are wrong. You are wrong. We need all of the
Okay,
brain
Shannon,
in order for the soul to interact with the brain. You haven't solved the interaction problem, Anthony. You haven't even come close. You're just
tried to.
asserting, nah, you're wrong, and our brain can just consistently reconstitute itself, which isn't the case, and we don't see it. That doesn't make you right. It makes you stubborn.
The mind reconstitutes the brain as is necessary.
No, it
You
doesn't.
also haven't.
So when the mind
You also have not
when the
demonstrated
mind
what problem you're solving. I don't. You're just saying it. You can't prove it wrong, but I've yet to hear
the
any
mind
articulation of what problem you're solving with this
the problem is
mind.
when you look at the physical structure of an atom, there's nothing that produces consciousness.
When you look
In a
at an
molecule?
H2O atom, Anthony, where is the wetness?
The wetness is a byproduct of how H2O molecules interact with each other.
What?
So it sticks to your skin.
What?
Yeah. So it sticks to your
So
skin
the
by
same thing can be true for other things, right?
certain type of bond.
So the same thing.
Well, no. Well, tell me
you
where
agree that you agree that you don't need to look for consciousness at an atomic level if you don't need to look for wetness at an atomic level.
I'm just asking. I can explain how wetness occurs purely in physical terms. Like I cannot. This is what I would like to hear. Where does the consciousness come from in an atom? You got the neutrons, the protons, and the electrons.
Okay, you've defined consciousness as like 15 different things up front. You were willing to go anywhere for your corner of consciousness. So I'm still yet to hear what problem you're solving. Tell me what
The problem is this.
problem you were solving.
The problem is consciousness is an experience of the external world around us. It's a sight, it's a sound, it's an awareness. Where is an atom aware of anything? Where does awareness come from in an atomic structure?
You don't. It's an
wetness is a
simile.
word.
Yes.
Wetness is a word.
Consciousness
Wetness is a word that
word.
describes what we feel when water molecules bond to our skin. And we understand exactly how that bonding and that interaction occurs.
So when
based on the properties of matter.
So 2,000 years ago, you're very well. First of all, I still don't even see what I don't see what the problem is with. Shannon described all the brain interactions, and they all seem to my satisfaction answer that a collection of those things emerge to experiences. So I'm still at a loss as to what this gap is that you're explaining.
The gap is this. You said there's an experience. I'm telling you, where does an atom experience anything?
Oh God.
I'm asking you that. Where does an atom experience
an individual atom doesn't.
The same place where an atom is wet. It's not, no single atom is wet. And no single atom is aware of anything.
All right. Well, to be incredibly technical, and I'm not trying to H2O is a molecule, not an atom, but that's just, I'm not trying to be pedantic there, but I just want, it's kind of getting to me a little bit. But we understand how molecules interact with each other based on their properties of the atoms within their structure. And that's what we describe using a word called wetness with water. With consciousness, you have to explain how you get from the physical structure of an atom to an awareness or an experience of the external world around you, or the atom, or the molecule. And I've never seen anyone even come close to
Okay,
proposing a
so
model for that.
so you're telling me that you're very much God of the gap, your mind of the gapsing this, your consciousness of the gapsing this. Then
There's a gap. There's a gap. Fill the gap in for me.
so you're
Where's the gap? Where's the
yeah,
where's the gap? How
so
you gonna
you're
fill the gap?
conscious. Just to be clear, your consciousness of the gapping here,
Why not?
your soul of the gapping.
What do you mean?
You're
Why
saying
not?
because
Why
we
not?
don't understand every single dot along the path,
You don't understand
and
any dot.
because
We understand. It's like, okay.
we misunderstand so many of the
We
dots.
understand so many dots, right? Like if we were playing connect the dots right now, we would have like 80% of the dots. But you're saying because we don't
You would
have
have
the rest of the
0%
dots,
of you
like
would have
we can
0% of
see a
dots. You've
good
given me dot.
no. We have a lot of the dots, but you're saying just because we don't have enough dots to complete the entirety of the picture, therefore there is no picture at all. Therefore, none of these dots matter anymore. And I'm just going to assert magic with absolutely no reason behind it. I'm just going to say that there is no picture at all, even though I can see a huge portion of the picture. Because it's not completed, that means it doesn't exist. And I'm saying, well, it does exist. I will admit that it's not completed. And you're saying, well, that picture just was that. Well, we'll just ignore every component of that picture that has been already completed. And I'm just going to say that my thing that can't be proven is right instead. And I feel as though I'm founded to do that because your picture's not complete. And I think that's unreasonable. And I think it intellectually vacuous as well. Think about how much we have found out, how much we have discovered, because we don't have the disposition that consciousness is just some magic thing that happens, because we're attempting to find out what it actually is, because we're delving and because we're doing science. If I had your disposition and attitude towards this mystery, no one would look at all. We would just say it's magic and walk away. We would lose our inquisitiveness. We would lose our attempts to find the real answer.
I disagree. I think people need to find the answer to what I'm asking. I think people
We're
are going to be looking for the answer.
You're not helping though.
Good.
You could be a little more helpful.
I'm telling you there's
you're telling me it's magic.
You don't want to acknowledge.
You're telling me it's magic.
Something you can
and
you
I'm
can call
telling
you
you it's not, and we're going to try to figure out exactly what it is. And you're saying don't bother because it's magic.
Okay. Well, you're admitting to me that
Of
you
all
don't
the
know,
things,
and that I'm correct.
Anthony, of all the things we've learned so far, how many of them were non-physical?
You mean
Of
in
all
all
the brain
scientific
things
history?
we've learned so far, let's say, do you think we know 25% of what's happening in the brain?
I don't know if I'd put a number on it, but we understand much more about the brain than we did decades ago. I'll admit that.
Cool.
But we don't
And how many of those things ended up? How many of those things ended up being non-physical?
Maybe none of them, but it doesn't matter because we still can't explain.
So what makes you think that there is even
happening.
a category of non-physical thing to explain the rest of it? You haven't demonstrated that it's even a category to consider.
Because it's the same reason scientists create this filler term called dark matter for the universe. It's like, well, there's something out there doing this, but we don't know what it is. So there must be something. We don't know what it is, but it's out there. I'm telling you that when we look at the brain, we don't know what's going on. We just
So
observe it happening. We can't explain it though.
You cut out for me for a second there. Did you go back to dark matter for a second?
I did.
Yeah. So dark matter, is anyone positing that dark matter is non-physical?
What else would it be? Right. Unless you're going to admit there's physical things we can't detect right now, which how does that happen?
Well, of course there's physical things we can't detect right now.
Okay, maybe the mind is one of those things. There you go. Point proven.
Maybe the mind is a physical thing we can't detect right now. That sounds like you're agreeing with us, but okay.
Whatever it is.
Did we have this whole fight just because you want to give a label to our gap in knowledge?
I wanted to explain to you that consciousness very clearly has no physical basis. And
no. You just agreed with me that it might be physical. You just agreed with me that it might be physical.
But physical in a sense that currently is not detectable by science. So whatever you want to call it,
So
it's there. It
No,
doesn't depend on, it
no.
doesn't
You
depend on the
just
body.
said that you said that a physical is a possible category,
The point
right?
is, it's not contingent on the body. That's all that matters. You can talk physical,
That you did
non-physical,
not
supernatural,
establish.
natural.
No. You did not establish that in by any leap or bound.
I did,
We've
because
established
you
as a
can,
category of we don't know, and I'm asking how many things that have been solved in the we don't know go into the non-physical. And then we can even include dark matter in this, because dark matter is still in the realm of we don't know.
well, you could say that. You could say, go to any point in scientific history. You could say, how many of the things we've discovered are not explicable in this term, and then they discovered something else, and it was like, okay, now we change our minds. I would know that's
This
not
is
going to happen.
excellent. Yeah, did every scientific discovery has ended up being a naturalistic explanation?
No, I would say logically we can see that physical interactions are insufficient in this case. We need something more.
You have not shown what seems to be to you to be insufficient. You have not convinced anyone on this panel. You will need to come with something much better to say, because that's like using the word impossible, right? Like insufficient. You're just making a category declaration because you're incredulous / credulous. You get that, right?
All I'm saying is you've given me no reason to think I'm wrong. None.
That's
Okay,
fine.
well-
That's fine. You're holding on to but you've multiplied an entity, but not, and then basically just declared that my entity is necessary because I am incredulous.
So, Paulogia, would you say you have faith that one day they will discover this explanation?
No, I absolutely not. What I'm saying is, until such time,
sounds like you have faith. Sounds like you have faith.
When we no. I said when we don't know, I sit here and say, hey, we don't know. But I have yet to see something. But until such time as I'm aware that immaterial is a category, why would I posit something immaterial as a category? That's not a faith that it is material. It is reserving judgment until there's sufficient. Did I ever say, did anyone in this panel say we've ruled it out?
Okay, your faith is that one day they'll find a material mechanism.
No, it's not. That is not what we're. Are you deliberately not listening, or are you on the other side? Can you present my?
There's a problem. You acknowledge it, and you think that it will be found according to your presuppositions about how reality works.
When did I say that? I think
there's a better likelihood than your explanation, which is no explanation at all, and is basically tantamount to just saying that I have an answer that explains everything just by default, therefore it also explains this, is useless. Okay. It's functionally useless. Well, and I don't care for it, because I would rather, I'm not done talking, because I would rather actually explore and find out what the answers are. And the more that we explore, the more we do find out, the more the gaps that you're talking about are filled. In my lifetime, do I think that we're going to solve the mind-body problem? Probably not. I absolutely don't think that that is going to be the case in my lifetime. Is it possible that we never do? It is. It's possible that we never do. But that doesn't make your answer likely. Your answer is nothing. Your answer is wind. Your answer is innocuous. Your answer is therefore it's magic, and I'm right and you're wrong because you don't have an answer. The difference between you and I is my inquisitiveness and my interest in actually finding real tangible answers leads me to explore the question in a way that leads us towards having more information than we did before the question was posed. Your position on this leads us to having no more information than before the question was posed. All it does is assert that the answer to everything, that is just the answer to everything by default, is also the answer to this. And that is absolutely devoid of any useful information, factual reality, testability, or information that in any way projects humanity or propels humanity towards knowing anything more than we already do right now. And if I have to pick between that and what I'm doing, I pick what I'm doing. And I'm not sure why you're picking what you're doing, because it's useless.
Okay. Well, I called in to ask you if you could show me where consciousness arises in an atom, and you didn't
Where
do
you
it.
are,
So,
oh,
and
good.
and
I didn't do it to your
it sounds to
satisfaction.
me
That's
like you.
fine. Anthony, we are done. We have been talking for an exceedingly long amount of time and we've gone in circles. I hope you have a great day and thank you for your call. Goodbye. Sorry, sometimes I get saucy because I'm over it. Anyway, hi. Sorry. Look at you. You're smirking
It's my
because you like
favorite.
it when I get annoyed. It's like his favorite thing when I lose my shit. You're an enabler.